You're listening to Big World Network.
Phineas Frakture and the Curse of the Steamhotep, Episode 5, written by Joseph Gatch, read by Michael Young. The early morning brought with it a dense fog, mingled with heavy soot from hundreds of chimney stacks that belched forth their warming residue. Steel hooves echoed off the cobblestones as a coach pulled up to Phineas Frakture's household. A single figure emerged from the cab, huddled in a cloak against the morning chill. His shoes scraped along the pavement, pausing momentarily to examine the charred outline on the walk and then continuing on to the front door. Ringing the bell, he was greeted by a bedraggled Mrs. Popkiss, still in her nightcoat. After handing her his card, he was immediately ushered in to be waited upon by the professor. Mrs. Popkiss disappeared to the upper floor, and soon returned with a confused look on her face.
He isn't in, sir. His bed hasn't been slept in either. If you would care to leave a message, I will be sure to give it to him as soon as he returns.
That will not be necessary, madam. I must wait for him to return and speak with him personally.
As you wish, replied the housekeeper. Would you care for some coffee or tea while you wait?
No, thank you. I am on duty.
Suit yourself. I will be in the kitchen if you change your mind.
About an hour later, the front door opened and Abigail came in.
Mrs. Popkiss, she called. Why is there a—
Oh! As she entered the kitchen, she was confronted by Mrs. Popkiss, 3 uniformed policemen, and a well-dressed gentleman. All were sitting at the table with mounds of food in front of them.
Hello, she said. Mrs. Popkiss, has something happened? They won't say, even after my pancakes. This is a tough lot they are. This one is waiting for the professor, and the rest, well, they smelled breakfast.
The front door opened again, and all turned expectantly. William, however, entered, and did a double-take as he saw the officers.
"Well, I guess this means that I just pile it all onto one plate today," he said as he began helping himself. "Not much time for seconds, is there? Excuse me, pardon me, are you going to eat that? No? Good."
He sat himself at the table and began eating.
"So, what did he do this time? There wasn't a cat involved, was there?"
"I'm afraid that I can't," stated the gentleman, and then the front door opened yet again.
"Well, we only know 2 people willing to visit, and they are already here, so that must be him. Finally," said Mrs. Popkiss.
"Mrs. Popkiss, why are there foul-smelling beasts and a coach in front of the house?"
"Yes, that's him," said William. The gentleman stood up as a bleary-eyed Phineas entered the kitchen. The professor, however, took no notice of the guests. "Mrs. Popkiss, I will be going to bed. Please have something ready for me around 2 o'clock. As he started to turn, the gentleman spoke up.
"Professor Frakture, I am Inspector Ezra Manifold of the New York Police. I need to ask you a few questions about your whereabouts last night."
"I as well," added Abigail. Phineas looked at him as if noticing him for the first time. "And why would the police be interested in where I was?" he asked testily. "Wouldn't you rather know the whereabouts of criminals instead?"
"That is why we are here."
"Oh, you've gone and done it now," Mrs. Popkiss said. "Did you destroy another freight yard?"
The 4 officers turned their heads toward her. However, the inspector continued.
"This is about murder, Professor."
"Murder? Just who did I murder?"
"Edward Kavanaugh, the great explorer."
"Phineas, did you?"
exclaimed Abigail. "No. And there was nothing great about him. Why would I kill Kavanaugh?" asked Phineas.
"Because of last night. Because we had dinner together,"
Abigail said.
"Lover's triangle, jealous boyfriend. It seems we have our motive,"
mumbled Manifold as he took notes. "Why would I be jealous of that? He was an imbecile."
"But you stormed out of here in a rage last night," said Abigail.
"No, I didn't. I needed to check on some things at the university. I've been up all night interpreting symbols.
Witchcraft as well, stated Manifold. This is becoming one twisted case, boys.
Will you stop that? Exclaimed Phineas. I was doing research on Kavanagh's mummy.
That would explain the notebook with your name on it at the scene of the crime. But when was the last time you saw the deceased?
Yesterday afternoon, answered Phineas. Can I have my notebook back? It has important research. Hush about your research, Phineas, scolded Abigail. I saw him last night at 8:30. He was quite lively, as I recall.
Excuse me, said William as he tried to swallow some pancakes, but just how did he die?
The inspector threw a pile of photographs onto the table, showing various shots of Kavanagh in his repose. His throat was crushed.
From the looks of it, it was with a wrench of some kind, replied Manifold.
And where was he found? Asked Phineas, picking up one of the photos and turning it every which way.
At the Exposition Theatre. He was lying in a mummy's casket.
On top of the mummy? The inspector looked confused.
There was no mummy. However, we did find a trail of bandages leading out the door.
Well, there's your motive, said Phineas. Find the mummy, and you find the killer. He had an assistant, Burke, I think his name was. You should check with him. He might know something.
Well, if you don't mind me saying, interjected William, his throat was crushed with something like a wrench. There were mummy bandages leading out the door, and no sign of the mummy. So it sounds to me,
William swiped some pancakes from Manifold's plate,
that the mummy's curse is real.
You're listening to Big World Network.